Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Lexi. I submitted a Freedom of Information request to the Law Commission on the 27th of August last year. It concluded with an internal review that finished on the 9th of July this year, so it was almost a year for the entire process. I decided to submit a request because I actually came to the conversation from conversations on Mumsnet. So I'm really grateful to the women there who were raising awareness of the public consultation. I was reading it and I thought perhaps I had concern that it was biased, and I wanted to find out who the stakeholders were. So you can have a look through the Freedom of Information request on this website, which is the What Do They Know website. All the information of the questions I asked and their responses are there. So as a result of the Freedom of Information request, I found a few interesting things. Of the 40 stakeholders involved in the preparation paper for the consultation, there was Natalie Gamble from Brilliant Beginnings, Barlow from British Surrogacy, and Cindy Vassa from Hope Springs Fertility Law, which is a law firm in Canada, and Stonewall. I'll come back to Stonewall a bit later. So here are some images from Barry Druitt Barlow's Instagram page. Here we have some puppies who are with their mum, as we were discussing that earlier. He breeds prize poodles, as well as makes a very sort of satisfactory living from surrogacy, as we can see there. Here he's talking about having triplets with his boyfriend. He's still married to Tony Druitt Barlow, co-director of British Surrogacy Centre. And actually he's not having triplets anymore because he had the two male fetuses terminated in the womb of the surrogate mother by fatal injection to the heart. The remaining female fetus, the baby girl, is expected to be born in October. I would recommend looking into Barry Druitt Barlow because he's being sued by a surrogate mother for damages. Essentially, her name is Megan Hoffner, and there's quite a lot of history regarding him and his businesses in the UK and overseas as well. So, two other people I mention are Cindy Vassa and Natalie Gamble. Both are heavily invested in surrogacy. They have their families built around surrogacy. Cindy Vassa has two daughters from the same egg donor, so that's one woman, and two other women were involved in delivering those children, one each. And Natalie Gamble has a child with her wife, and that child came about from a sperm donor, so that's a donor conceived child. Both run non-profit surrogacy agencies, or what would be called matching services, and then each of them also has a law firm that specialises in surrogacy, fertility laws and laws around surrogacy arrangements. So they very much have their lifestyles, families, and income from surrogacy. So in terms of other things I found out through the FOI, there was more than one meeting with these groups. I unfortunately wasn't able to get hold of the minutes from the meetings as the Law Commission wouldn't release them. They refused to give that information on the Freedom of Information request. So I don't know really what the content was of those meetings, but I assume that the Foreign and Commonwealth Office would have been discussing the exploitation of women that comes through international surrogacy arrangements. The Department of Education I'm a little confused about. I wonder whether it has anything to do with the lift of the ban on advertising. And I say this because I know in the US there are universities where advertising is allowed, and essentially those groups, surrogacy agencies and matching services, target young women in university who are looking to earn money. Lastly, obviously the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, but then the Surrogacy UK group, they run the all-party parliamentary group. And whilst this isn't particularly unusual, it obviously perpetuates a bias because the Surrogacy UK are a matching service as well. They're a surrogacy agency. In addition to this, the Law Commission team for surrogacy reform on their 13th programme of reform was made up of 11 men and 7 women. So Stonewall is an interesting stakeholder. The Law Commission had a media strategy for the publication and promotion of the consultation, and here are some extracts from that media strategy. The highlights shown here are their highlights, not my highlights, but it's clear that they were targeting gay men through gay media. And they, in addition to this, they did have national coverage from the BBC and national newspapers. All of those links, all of that coverage can be seen on the Freedom of Information request under the internal review at the very end. But there's no women's magazines listed. And I think that's interesting because traditionally speaking, women's media, sort of women's weekly magazines, have always been sympathetic to surrogacy stories. And so I'm not sure if that was an oversight. When the consultation was launched, there were some women's organisations that were involved, and this centred around pregnancy, as you can see here, fetal movement, miscarriage, preeclampsia. So that makes sense, of course, but they did also speak to Rights of Women, which is a women's legal charity, Filia, which is a women's rights organisation, and Rosa, that's a women's poverty charity. But none of these organisations were involved in the design of the consultation like the other organisations were. They were able to submit a response along with everybody else in the same way. But there seems to be a hierarchy of stakeholders, I think, around how the Law Commission approached this. This is a quote from the reply, one of the replies that I sent to Philip Golding. He's the CEO of the Law Commission. That was in the internal review stage. So in terms of the dates here, it was the deadline for the public consultation response on the 11th of October. The women's groups listed here were contacted 25 days after the consultation closed. So, obviously it's too late really by that stage to do anything other than send a response. In terms of what follows the public consultation document, the Law Commission sent this email to people who responded to the consultation, and it says there that they will release some information in 2022. We might have a draft bill to review, but it could also be delayed because of COVID, so we'll have to wait and see. What's next for me? So, as a result of this process and by coming to the conversation from a feminist perspective via Mumsnet, I'm launching a grassroots campaign to raise awareness of surrogacy and what it involves and the darker sides of it, to challenge the media agenda, hopefully to, influence the media coverage a little bit and possibly have some protests. We can see an image here from France demonstrating the transactional nature of surrogacy, where the dolls are in supermarket trolleys. I think it's quite important to remember that I think it's reasonable to expect people who are involved in surrogacy, who make their income from it, or who build their families via surrogacy, to be pro surrogacy. I mean, that makes sense. But I think it's also reasonable to expect that our lawmakers and the people involved in drafting proposals and making recommendations to Parliament to take a wide range of views and to be unbiased in their approach, so that they are looking to include all stakeholders, because actually we're all stakeholders in the process, as these are the laws of our country. And I think that's an important thing to remember. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. If there's anything you would like to know, I will leave my details so you can get in touch. Thank you so much.